What's going on, y'all? I'm Alex Quin, and today we are at Loud and Live Engage Live with the CEO, Tony Albelo. What's going on, man?
Here, just trying to carve out some time to chat with you. Been waiting to do it for a while now.
Hey, man. I was looking forward to this. I've recently had a nice chat with Nelson. Before and after we talked about you. Want to give a big shout out to Angela for setting this up. Angela Rodriguez. I've got to know a little bit about you over the last 2 weeks. I really think it's cool what you do, man. Events is it's a whole other beast than what I do. I'm a digital marketer. I run ads. Events is a whole other thing. And you've been really creative with the way that you do events, and I really like that. Okay, today I wanted to talk a little bit about your career, what you have going on right now, your position in Engage Live, and how you got to where you are today, man.
Cool.
So talk to me. You are a born and raised Miami boy.
Well, technically, no. I'm
No?
really not. No. I say that I do
Okay.
because it's easier to explain. I was actually born in Los Angeles.
Okay.
So Miami, where there's a lot of Cuban Americans. I'm Cuban American. My parents happened to, when they came from Cuba, they went to LA. And so my brothers and my sister and I were born in Los Angeles. But I came when I was 4.
Okay.
So, I basically grew up here. I went to elementary, junior high, high school, and college here. And so whenever anybody asks me, oh, you from Miami? I say yes. It's a little bit of a white lie, but I mean, it is what it is.
You're a Miami guy.
I'm a Miami guy, 100%.
You've been bright since I've gotten to consume some of the content that you have out there. I was really impressed. I saw a lot of myself in a lot of the things that you said. You became an entrepreneur at 4 years old, was that?
Yeah, in 4th grade.
In fourth grade, yeah.
So yeah, in 4th grade, I started selling. Well, I mean, I don't know if anybody young is gonna understand this, but carbon papers, right? The purple paper you put. For whatever reason, it was a thing, because you could write secret notes. You could write on paper, and you wouldn't see what you wrote, and then on the back,
on the
second sheet, you have that. So it was like this little mini cottage industry that I started in my elementary school, and I would go through and I would find carbon paper like behind a Sears. I would go in and get the carbon paper, and sometimes they were new, and I would sell them for 5, 10, 15, 25 cents. And I had them in plastic. It's crazy. It's stupid. I'm even saying this. I'd have them in plastic, like pouches or pencil pouches.
Yeah.
And I'd grade them, and then the nicer unused ones were like 25 cents, and the ones that were used already when they didn't come out as good were like 5 cents. And I was making money. I had, I would buy all my friends pizza. Pizza was 25 cents a slice. It was crazy. But yeah, it's at first my little micro business was selling carbon paper.
What do you think made you be that way? Did you have a role model? Did you see that on TV and movies? What made you at so young be able to differentiate all those types of things that you could do as a business?
I'm not I don't want to like poo-poo my childhood or anything like that. It was a great childhood, and as we say in Spanish, a mí no me faltaba nada. And I wasn't missing anything in my life. But we did grow up. My parents, my dad was a bartender. My mom worked in a bank. So they were blue collar and workers. My mom's bank position, she was basically a data entry person,
Mm-hmm.
and she had they had 4 kids. So it was kind of tough growing up. It was, we were on reduced lunch. That was, like a government program for that. And I remember even kids teasing me about it at my own school.
Mm-hmm.
Friends that were, similar socioeconomic levels, but I was on free lunch, right? And I think maybe it was because of that.
Mm-hmm.
It was the desire to be better, or to have more, or to have what I didn't have. That I think is probably my primary driver. Was that entrepreneurial spirit was born by necessity, and I think that was it.
I relate to that a lot because I had a fantastic childhood. Obviously, things could always be better, but seeing the room for opportunity and room for growth that we could have had, it really motivated me to help my parents and make something of myself, make them proud, and become part of the family, add to the family instead of becoming a pain in the ass and giving issues. That was a big motivator for me. Living in Miami, everybody on boats, everybody doing this, everybody doing that. You kind of want to have your own stuff. You want to make your own money and do cool stuff. And I know you're into boating and fishing.
Yeah, big time.
So you understand that part.
Yeah, and I'll stop the sad childhood story with this one story, which is I grew up by the airport in an apartment here in Miami,
Mm-hmm.
and the way that the the district lines are drawn, I ended up going to high school at Coral Gables High, and back in those days, Coral Gables the High was a pretty illustrious school. I mean, a lot of well-to-do families that long-standing Miami families were in my class in high school at the time. And the first house party that I went to, my amazement was that all the houses on the block had pools, because at that time I didn't know anybody that had a house with a pool.
Yeah.
And then I went to my first house party and I said, man, not only does this house have a pool, but everybody has a pool. And I guess seeing the way the other half lived really drove me to be better and do better and to hustle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you were in college, correct me if I'm wrong, right? I'm recapping everything I've learned about you. When you were in college, you had a job as a messenger.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
And the company you work for, I believe, needed some type of software.
Yeah. So when I was in high school, I'll go back one step.
Yeah.
I was kind of an oxymoron. I played every sport. I played football. I ran track. I wrestled, and then I was also on the computer programming team. So I was a geek at heart. I loved computers, and I was on the computer programming team in our school. And we went to the state finals and things like that. So I was always had an affinity for that. And when I started after high school, I started at Miami-Dade. I was working as a messenger for a U.S. custom broker and freight forwarder, and everything was on paper. It was typed up forms. There was a form called 3461, a 7501, and one day I told my boss, I said, "Hey, man, why don't you just automate this? I mean, 75% of all the information on one form and the other form and your invoice and all this, like of these 4 major forms are the same." And he said, "Well, the systems cost $200,000, and back then it was just different." And I said, "You could probably do that with a PC." And he says, "Do you think you could do that?" And I said, "I think so." And we ended up buying a computer, buying a dot matrix printer, and I ended up writing the software for him that would do those forms, the 3461, the 7501, I forgot the third one, and an invoice. And it worked. And I wrote it, and my trade-off was, this is so stupid, but I wanted a gold card at Scandinavian, which was a gym that had just opened up here in Doral. So that was my deal. That was how good of a businessman I was, that I wrote that software for a gold card at Scandinavian, which had just opened up, which is now Bali, which was then Bally's, and I forgot what it went to after that. But luckily, my boss, his name was George Sam, was very appreciative, and he started telling other freight forwarders and custom brokers about it. And he got me to sell
few licenses.
Yeah, so I sold like 10 or 15 licenses, and I think I was charging like $1,500.
Yeah.
And so I started selling software, my own software at that time, and that's.
Who would have thought something from high school? But I think there's a lesson in there. You tried different things in high school.
Yeah.
You didn't just stick to one thing. You tried and you explored what you like, what you were good at, and an opportunity came. And I believe that one day somebody came trying to sell a service to your boss for tech, and they saw what you did, and then ended up making you a job offer.
Yeah, so that was it. So it got to a point where the U.S. Customs started evolving, and they wanted all the data, and they were going to make it mandatory for custom brokers to submit that data electronically to U.S. Customs in Washington, D.C., and then all the entries were going to become electronic. And it was a little bit over my head. I mean, I was 19 or 20, I forgot. And so my boss at the time started meeting with companies, software companies, and one of them asked, "What software are you using now?" And he said, "This one." He says, "Oh, I haven't seen this." And they go, Tony wrote it. And then he said, "Hey, do you mind if I make Tony a job offer?" And right then, he said, "Hey, I'd love you to come work for us." And I said, "Sure." And I took the job, and I went.
What is the next step after that? Because I know you got into putting in high-speed lines and construction and all that.
So I went to work. I went to work at that company, ACF Miami, as a software developer, and then I started doing the installs. I was obviously the youngest guy in the company, so I had a really flexible schedule, and I was doing a lot of installs in Miami and New York and LA, a lot of the big port cities. So they had clients in all those big port cities, and eventually I left and I started my own little computer company, doing networks and structured cabling and things like that. I took on a partner We grew the company. It was pretty, relatively successful for me at that time. It was, I was able to, like, my car lease was done through the company, and I had a company expense account, and I was making money, so it was great. And then we happened to do a kind of like a consulting gig for a developer that was building a building in Miami Beach, actually the Continuum, which is a pretty big, popular, expensive building in Miami Beach. And they said, hey, we had done their wiring and their network for their sales office. They said, hey, we're thinking about doing the structured wiring in the building. Do you know anything about it? And I knew a little bit about it. And it basically, that's changed now, but it was, data for internet, cable for television, and telephone lines, and having that be like one system. And they didn't know what they were doing. They asked me to write the RFP. So we did a contract for me to create an RFP to do the structured wiring.
Request for proposal, by the way.
Right, RFP, request for proposal, so they could get other companies to bid on doing the wiring. 2 bidders approached them to do it, and then they asked me to stay on consulting. My client asked me to stay on consulting to make sure that the 2 companies were vetted and that they knew what they were talking about. And what I realized is that neither one of them knew what they were talking about. So one of them eventually won it, and then they got the project. And then I started talking to the owner, and I said, this is probably a good thing for new buildings going up, like not just this one, every building, because the way that it worked is that if you own the wiring in the building, you kind of own the rights to it to some degree, right? Yeah. At least for like a year.
The service, at least, right?
Yeah. So the condo, again, not to get too technical, it's a little bit boring, but if a condo association, once they top off a building, the developer is the condo association until they elect a condo association, and that normally takes a year or more. So I could make a deal with the developer to get that contract for the services. So we did, and we ended up with like seven or 8 buildings. Now the trade-off was that we paid. It's like we put up the cost of wiring the building in exchange for this contract.
Yeah, and that removed friction in closing the deal.
Correct. And then of course, what we'd have a return on the investment. The ROI wasn't too long, and it was normally pretty guaranteed because we had to deal with the developer, who was the condo board during the initial phase of the building being ready, and then it was every door. So it was not like, hey, it's $25 a month for internet. It was $25 a month for internet times 400 units. And the association is the one that paid.
Yeah.
So
you don't have to go chasing 400 people down.
Exactly. So it was a pretty sweetheart deal. Cash intensive because we had to pay the labor and the wiring and everything in the building. So once we got to like our 8th or 9th building, we ran out of money.
Yeah.
So I'll never forget, we had a meeting with like an investor that was gonna like start doing limited partnerships with us on new buildings, and that was 9/11. So that day I was about to leave to go to the meeting. 9/11 happened. I went to the meeting, and the investor was a New York guy, and he was like, look, I'm kind of not in the right frame of mind to talk about it. So that kind of changed the world a little bit. And then Comcast came knocking on our door and offered to buy us every door. So we were able to sell all the contracts that we had for the buildings, and I forgot what number it was, but it was a pretty nice chunk of change. And we sold all the contracts to Comcast.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was pretty fun. I mean, it was fun for me because you got to imagine a kid growing up in Miami. I hadn't even graduated college, and I'm
working on these big deals,
and I'm learning, this investor and limited partnerships on different deals and all these things, and the whole concept of doing something in exchange for a long-term contract where you front the money. Like, think about that. That's something that was a little bit foreign to me. It was kind of a good learning experience.
Yeah. What did your family think about, like your parents think about this the whole time? Because I mean, there was big risk, and they're probably worried about you, like any other parent.
My parents have always been great, right? They've always supported me. They're very, proud of me and really all my brothers and my sisters and my sister. They just let me do my thing. They always, they would.
They don't cut your wings.
No, not at all. Yeah. And they would just always tell me, be careful and think,
Miami's a crazy place to do business, man.
It really is.
It's a wild place.
It really is. The big change in my life. I mean, I must have been, I don't know, 21, 22 at that time, was when I realized in that company, a longtime friend of mine that we were friends in second grade, joined me as a partner in that computer company, and I remember as the business grew that I just naturally migrated to doing all the marketing for the company and all the sales and going to see the clients and everything. And my partner, he became the hands-on guy. And so all the techs we had and all the wiring techs and everybody we had really worked for him.
Yeah.
And I was like the lone man just going out and getting the clients and creating the campaigns. Like for example, during Y2K, during the year 2000, I came up with this campaign that was Y2K. Like
okay, like what? Yeah.
Like Y2K, and it was a fax campaign at the time. So I had thousands of fax machines, numbers in Miami, and I would send this little cartoon of these two cartoon computers, and it was like Y2K, like what is Y2K really about, and like that, and got a lot of business like that, and I realized then that I enjoyed the marketing and the business running side of it much more than the technical computer side of it.
You've been ahead of your time in a lot of these things that you've been doing. That's like that was what you would call the modern day text message or email blast. You were using fax machines.
Yeah, and then once I once I realized that was my true calling, was that marketing and sales and running the business side of it, I decided to leave my company, and my partner made a deal. So I split up with him, and I started a little agency. And the very first thing I got asked to do was help and create a marketing and ad campaign for a motorcycle show here in Miami.
I remember you did great with that one. Yeah.
So I met the two owners, and I realized that I didn't know what I was doing. They knew less about the show, about creating the show. So I did a deal with them, and I put my money where my mouth was, and I did it for very cheap, but I wanted incentives. I said, how many people do you think we can get? And they said 15,000. And I said, all right, so if we get more than 15,000, I want an ownership stake in the show, and I want a bonus. And they said, okay. So I did it. So I went to some of the biggest motorcycle shows in the country. I went to Daytona. I went to New York for a big business-to-business motorcycle trade show in Indianapolis. And I learned a lot about the motorcycle industry and more than anything, like the trade shows and consumer shows. And we did it, and we ended up with 22,000 people, and that was in 2001. And that show, they were the majority owners. Unfortunately, that was done at the Coconut Grove Convention Center, which was a real nice place, which is what Regatta Park is now, right in front of City Hall. After that, they demolished it, and we had to move to the Miami Beach Convention Center. It was much more expensive to do, and they ended up not doing it anymore. But that event was, I had a lot of changes in my life at that time, where I went from, thinking I was like a computer geek to really knowing and realizing I'm much more of a marketing and sales guy.
Yeah.
To then saying, well, I really love the event side of marketing and sales. So that was my first event. And in that short period, I said I was destined to produce events, because I loved it. I loved the creation of it. I loved seeing it, working hard on it, and then seeing it all come together at the end is incredibly gratifying. It really is.
Yeah. One of the things I really liked about you when I was doing the research is you're a calculated risk taker. I really like the story about that Wynwood building you took over.
Yeah.
The landlord allowed you to stay for a year for no rent, as long as you fixed the place up, because there was air conditioning units missing and it was all messed up, and you did that. And that's kind of where a lot of the events started taking place, right? Yeah. That's where it started building up.
Exactly it. So just preceding that a little bit, I was in the Grove and had an office in Coconut Grove, and I created a beer festival called Grovetoberfest, and it was a big hit. It was
first one, right?
Yeah, first beer festival in Miami. There weren't even any breweries in Miami. The only company selling beer that was from Miami was Miami Brewing, which is Schnebley's, and they were contract brewing in Orlando. So there was nothing here. And it was a big hit. And then I created the Coconut Grove Seafood Festival, and then a spring beer festival called Sprung, and all of that. And then right when that was happening, I came up with this
Sprung.
concept.
I like that.
Yeah. So we were in Wynwood. I mean, sorry, we were in the Grove, and I had this concept for this. Wynwood just started kind of getting noises around 2010, 2013, and I said, man, this Wynwood, and I went there one Friday night, and I said, shit, I would love to just sell churros on the corner if I could here. Like there was this energy, so I created this hashtag called Wynwood Life, and it took off, and I was a Facebook page, an Instagram page, and a website. And my initial idea was to just have listings of all the things that were going to be happening in Wynwood and the galleries and just that kind of stuff. And it caught so much heat in a good way that I said, man, I'm going to create a festival around this on the streets of Wynwood. And I had once again taken on a partner that was a little bit more on the operational side, and we started Wynwood Life as this festival in Wynwood. I was still in the Grove, but it was such a big hit that the owner of the adjacent property, I got to know him, and they said, hey, I said I would love to move to Wynwood, and he said, well, I got this building. It's an old retail space. There's no ACs. There's nothing. It's as is. 1 year, no rent.
Knock yourself out.
So we took it. The company at the time was called Ocean Promotions. We decided to change the name to Swarm. Again, always having a tech background. I remember sitting with my partner and saying, there's this thing called swarm technology that's coming out that's about devices communicating with each other like fish in a school or insects.
Swarm of bees, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's going to become a buzzword. So let's go with it. And they're like, I don't know. And I said, no, it's going to be good. And we did. And we built a great company in Wynwood. We were, we were there. I think we might have been the first people to ever use the old RC Cola plant. We took over a vacant lot that was just used for food trucks on second Saturdays. We got it paved. We got a long-term permit there. And again, same owner of the building that we have was the owner of that lot, and really kind of spearheaded that whole second Saturday where it wasn't second Saturday anymore. It was every Saturday, and then it was like every weekend, and then it's every day. So we were there from 2013 till really around to 2020 when the pandemic came. Yeah,
I believe I went to one of your events. It was in 2019. It was December. I think it was at the RC Cola factory, because I remember seeing Swarm everywhere. I had no idea who you guys were at the time, but I started seeing it, and there was trucks, and everybody was talking about Swarm. And it's funny, to this day, I have a client at my marketing agency that I met at that event. And we become like the bestest of friends. So like, it's so funny how everything connects. And when Angela told me about you, I was like, I met one of my best clients at this guy's event. How crazy. Like, what a small world.
It is.
And what I really liked about how you put the events together is that some of them are unconventional because they're what you would go to, and since it doesn't exist, you create it. So, for example, the beer festival. There's been other ones in the world, but the nearest one was Jupiter. You came and did it in Miami.
Yeah, that's exactly it. That was the genesis of it. I'm like, what do you mean we don't have like a friend of mine? Said, oh, we'll go to a beer festival. We got to go to Jupiter. I said, no, one in Miami. There's none. I'm like, are you crazy? Jupiter has one in Miami. This cosmopolitan city. We don't have one. It's crazy. And then that was it. And it really, you're right. It is sometimes about what do I want to see. When I did my first fishing tournament, which was right around the motorcycle show, I had been invited to one, and I was underwhelmed. And I said, man, it's a very strong male demo. I was imagining like girls and bikinis and just very very male chauvinistic thing, but it was a strong like 99% male audience.
Yeah.
And I said, man, I want to. I know today is probably a bad thing, but it was a long time ago. It was 2002, and I said I'm gonna create my own fishing tournament, but it's gonna have like girls washing boats and a bikini contest and all this. And
kind of like the car shows and stuff. Yeah.
And it was a big hit. First year, like 84 boats. The next year, I had like 130 boats. And to put it in perspective, the second year I had over 100 boats. It was the biggest fishing tournament in South Florida, just in the second year.
Yeah.
So sometimes I do something or I see something. I'm like, I'd like it. I'd enjoy it more if it was like this.
Yeah.
And we do it.
Okay, so that was a little bit about what you did before and how you got to where you are now. Incredible story, and thank you for sharing it. Let's talk about Engage Live and what you have going on now and how that kind of formed.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, 2020 was, pandemic came, and it was we didn't know what the future was going to hold, and I made a deal with my partners to exit. Even though I started the company, it's a little bittersweet, but it was the right move at the time, and hindsight shows that it was. I lived out my non-compete, and then Nelson, who had we had known each other for a while, and he said, "Hey, if you're going to start up again, I'd love to partner with you to really build something bigger than what you had before and better." And I said, "Look, it makes sense. You already have the infrastructure, the accounting and the HR and a lot of this back office, which would free me up to really
be creative,
be creative, build the events, and get the business." And he was right, because in 2 years, since 2021 to now 2023, we eclipsed our biggest years at my former company just in 2 years. So Nelson was right. I don't like telling him that, but he was. And then, what we set out to do was to create a division of Loud and Live, hyper focused on the local market.
Yeah.
On local, big, large scale events like we have now. Luckily, Loud and Live and Nelson had House of Horror, so I inherited that as part of the deal. And it was around for, since 2000, I think, for 20 years, 21 years. Then I took it over in 2021. And to kind of put it in perspective, that's the year we came back out of COVID.
Yeah.
House of Horror would do around 85,000 people over the month. That was the biggest numbers they had before the pandemic. After the pandemic, in the last 2 years, we've had over 125,000 people per year. So we blew by those numbers, and everybody's been happy with the new product. And then so we have that. We're just launched a Country Bay Music Festival. It's the first large-scale country event in Miami ever. And again, everybody says Miami and country, and yes, we over
30-something% of country listeners are Latinos, isn't it?
Oh yeah, are Hispanic and also African American is a large selection of that, and not only is it a large percentage of it, but it's the highest growing segment of country music fans are Hispanic and African Americans. So they're larger than you think, and they're growing very quickly within that segment of country music fans.
Yeah, a lot of other maybe businesses may be neglecting that, but you guys found opportunity there, and it shows.
Yeah,
it's all over. Everybody's talking about it.
It's crazy to think.
You can't go anywhere without seeing it.
Yeah, and honestly, it's crazy to think Miami and country. Yeah, like who would have thought it? But yeah, there it is. It's happening. It's like I always think, man, who was the first person to dip a buffalo wing in blue cheese? Right? like how did that happen? So yeah, Miami and country, it's a real thing. So we have that. We launched a boat show earlier this year called SoFlo Boat Show at Miami Marine Stadium. Wildly successful. Really catering to the local market. Sea trials right on. We have a giant 100,000 square foot air conditioned tent. You go in there, see the boat, walk outside. We had floating docks. Get on that same boat and take it for a sea trial and buy the boat. The boat dealers recorded incredible sales. And obviously, we're bringing it back again next year, or for our second year. And this year, we actually launched 3 events. We launched the SoFlo Boat Show, Country Bay, and now we're about to launch Christmas Wonderland. And that is that is by far the largest event I've ever produced. Longest event, it's almost 2 months. Largest in terms of potential attendance. We don't know yet, but we expect it to be pretty large. Largest event by means of revenue and costs, right? It's the most costly event I've ever done. And
so this is the most ambitious project thus far.
Definitely the most ambitious. And not only that, but I think it's also the one that's really tested the limits of our team's creativity, their stamina and everything, because it is a lot to do. You would have I thought I knew what it was to do a large scale event in a short amount of time and produce it and not only create it, but build it and then tear it down. This is a monster compared to anything we've ever done.
I'm sure it's going to work out well because everything you do with passion. And I wanted to bring up something because when I talked to Nelson, when he talked to me about Country Bay, is There's a very strong family aspect for you guys in both individually, right? So, for example, his kids are into a country and his family, and that kind of opened up a certain world for him. And I know you're a father of twins. I believe you were on a trip to New York and you saw the ice skating and the Christmas stuff, and one of your daughters asked you, "Why don't we have this in Miami?"
Yeah,
And
that's
kind of like that.
yeah.
Maybe that was a catalyst too. And
It definitely was. And look, early on, and when we first started speaking, I said about me being from Miami, and I really feel that I am a big Miami homer. And like I said with the beer festival, like, what do you mean we don't have a beer festival? Jupiter, like this little town up in the middle part of the state. Same thing. I'm in New York, and I'm at Bryant Park, and my
beautiful
daughter,
park.
like,
I love it.
love it. And in winter, it's beautiful, and they have the marketplace and the ice skating and all. And I said, man, we're every bit as good as New York, if not better. Like, why can't we have cool stuff like this in Miami as well? And that was definitely one of the driving forces. Nelson as well has been a huge fan of Christmas events for 20 years. And it just kind of, those things aligned, and we got this opportunity, and we're taking it, and we built Christmas Wonderland, and it's a lot of creativity going into it. And as a marketing guy, you'll probably enjoy a lot of the things that we're doing and the way we're kind of thinking of the ways that we're doing things.
I've already stalked everything, all the landing pages, all this.
Yeah,
I've looked at everything.
You have to. And then again, going back to like some of my childhood things that I mentioned, because I was in Wynwood, and I was able to build a business, and and get married and buy a house and kids, and and successful within my own world. I really appreciate the things that I did get to do. So when we talk about something like Christmas Wonderland, I really think about, okay, what are some things that I know are cool and we've gotten to experience that I think maybe a lot of other parts of Miami, or a lot of other Miamians haven't been able to experience, like the Van Gogh immersive experience, right? It's been all over the world. It's been in Miami forever. A lot of people have never been to it, have never seen what
I've seen
3D
it, but I haven't
mapping
been
is.
to it, yeah.
So they don't know what 3D mapping is. They don't know what that is. So at Christmas Wonderland, I wanted to make sure that we had something to do with that. So we have this 360-degree dome that has six projectors inside, and it's a completely seamless experience where you go in and you have a 360-degree view of a snow roller coaster ride. So it's very, very, very cool, very different. We have selfie moments. So I don't know if you've ever been to the Museum of Ice Cream at the Faena at Miami Beach. Was a little pop-up. It was supposed to be a month long with a couple of little corners of a room that were Instagrammable that you could jump into. And next thing you know, it was a hit. And they expanded it. They had it for 2 years. It had a 2-year run instead of 1 month. They did it again in New York, and it's still running in New York, Museum of Ice Cream. So I connected with the team that built and designed and built that, and I hired them to create some unique selfie moments within Christmas Wonderland as well. So that if you're a blue collar worker here in Miami and you don't get to go out to Wynwood or to any place that's hip and cool, maybe you don't get to do a lot of some of those selfie moment things. So we built that with that in mind, to say, hey, let's let people experience these other things in one place that are all holiday related that maybe they wouldn't get to experience somewhere else. And in a way, kind of like giving back and saying, hey, I got to see some things, when I was young that made me want to aspire to do more and better. And maybe that'll inspire somebody to say, like, hey, man, this is cool. I want to get into mapping. I want to get into building these creative sets or whatever it may be.
Speaking of inspiration, for your daughters, that they had that moment where they brought that up, seeing their father materialize something that was briefly spoken must be a huge inspiration. Maybe they don't see it now, maybe they'll see it later on, but it's probably definitely going to make a big impact on them. Tony, how do you want to be remembered?
So look, I know it's gonna, I don't want anything for free, right? I want to work for my stuff, and even my daughters, and same thing. Like, they go to House of Horror, they cannot cut the lines. They wait in line like everybody else. They're mandatory. They have to work a few nights of House of Horror when it's here, because they need to understand that, and I want them to understand what it takes to happen. So I want to be definitely known as a as a good dad. So anyway, so to me, that's probably the most important thing. And really just being a good person. I try to help my team, my staff, everybody. It really is something that I look forward to. It's just really being just being a good guy,
Yeah.
and whatever that means. Does that mean that I didn't look at a classmate's test here and there? Yeah, I probably did. But take some red lights and speed, sure. But when it comes to knowing that I can sleep well at night, I do. I really do. I do things right. I I just want to, like I would say, I want to make money, but I want to make money the right way.
Yeah.
And to me, that's important. Um, you know, but I know we talked a lot about me, but a lot of these things that I'm able to do now at these larger scale isn't really, like, you can't do that by yourself, right? Like, my team is so important. Like, everybody that works with us is so critical, that it even knowing everything I know and being through everything I've been through, it would be impossible. It would be impossible to do without them. And even at home, my team, my wife, like I don't have the opportunity to go to orthodontist appointments and everything else that she does, and like, it really is about a team. Even when I did my first shows by myself is when I realized, man, I need good people around me, and that's critical.
I love your answer. I want to be a good dad.
Yeah.
I asked a lot of people this question. I don't think I've ever gotten that answer, and if I have, maybe it's been one or two times. And it's very important to think that way, because family is the most important thing, and family is what keeps you going. And business is difficult sometimes. I mean, you went through COVID and a bunch of other stuff, and having a good family, having a good support system, having good values in your family is ultimately what's the most important. You'll make money, you'll go through things, but that stuff is really solid.
Yeah. Listen, I had a big disaster in my event world, which was the grind. I had this crazy idea. My wife says, "You're always selling, and you even sell yourself on bad ideas." So, and she's right, because this was one of them. I decided to do a burger competition, like, to rival South Beach Wine and Food Festival's Burger Bash. And like I want to do one in Miami, I want to do it in Wynwood, and I created one called The Grind. And I had a lot of great competitors, but I wanted to do it inside this vacant warehouse. And I got plans, and I don't know how I did it, but everybody signed off on it, and they were cooking inside the building, like grills, and I had all the grills piped outside because the propane tanks were outside, and we had this system that was supposed to be a positive pressure air system that was going to push the smoky air out as it was being created. And it didn't quite work out that way. One of the 3 air conditioners went down. The room started getting smokier and smokier, and I ended up having to cancel the event. I got killed online. I financially was terrible. I had sold my boat to pay off my vendors.
Yeah.
It was rough, and it was depressing, because imagine, you think to yourself, this is my chosen career to be an event person, create events, and then you have this disaster in an
what
event.
now? Yeah.
And like, now, like, all your reality is just ended. And I remember telling my wife, I said, you know what? As long as I'm alive, that's all that matters, because I will make it again. I'll build it back. If I got to here now, I can get to here again, right?
Yeah.
And think of even a football analogy. I remember coach once told me, we were down like 17-0 at the half. He says, if they scored 17 points in a half, you can score 17 points in a half.
Yeah.
I said, yeah, he's right. So, if I got to there at that point in my life, I mean, it's not, I can do it again. I did. I went, I did deals with my vendors. They all gave me breaks. I sold my boat. I paid off the vendors. I ended up with some extra money because the boat was more than what I owed to my vendors. And,
in other words, you didn't screw everybody over. You made everybody whole, and you figured it out with everybody.
I had to, whether I wanted to or not, I had to give a lot of refunds, because people just disputed on their credit card. So people asked for refunds, and I just gave it to them. And that was it. And I did bounce back from that. And
you still work with most of those people, right?
Yeah. And
there you go.
a lot of those vendors are still vendors with us today, 20 years later. And I use them all the time, Friendly John and American Portable Air Conditioning. And, I won, now we're talking about that. I really believe in local. So a lot of our vendors, if not all of them, are local companies. And I get hit up by national companies. There's nothing wrong with, with a national company that rents fence or that rents generators. It's just that I prefer the local guys, right? When I can, because I am a business myself the same way, right?
Yeah.
So I try to do that. I buy myself American cars. My wife, different, but I've had American cars. Again, I keep thinking of that ecosystem and giving back and karma and all of those things, and that's at least in my mind, it makes sense.
I love that. I want there to be more of that in the world. That type of hustle inspires hustle. That's why we're called Hustle Inspires Hustle. Sharing stories like yours. Tony, I really appreciate you taking the time. I know you're in the middle of craziness. You have this big event that you're taking on, and you took the time to sit here with us today. So it means a lot. Thank you. I really like what you do. I respect you. As a marketer, I recognize the hard work that it takes to do the type of stuff that you do. And I'm very excited to bring my family to support your events and to continue seeing how you guys continue to innovate and break barriers here.
Yeah, listen, I surprise myself sometimes. I don't know how I'm gonna do them, but somehow we pull it out.
Yeah. All right, y'all. You heard it. This is Alex Quin, Tony Albelo, CEO of Engage Live. Catch you on the next episode.